Welcome everybody to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. This is just a out of the blue stream to recognize and pay our respects for a legend, Assata Shakur, and Hiram and Renee are joining us to start it off. I'm going to let Hiram go first because I know Hiram's a little bit short on time today, and I know also that you probably among the three of us are the closest in many ways to to Assata, to folks in her circle. And so yeah, I'll let you take the lead, Hiram.
Yeah, thanks, Jared, and thanks for putting this together. You know, first and foremost, definitely want to send out our sincerest condolences to the family, all of her family, um, and then just the condolences, right, to the rest of the movement as a whole. Assata Shakur has been an incredible influence, North Star for so many people politically, ideologically, across generations, right? And it's definitely someone who will live forever in our memories, live forever in our actions, live forever in our political thoughts and ideology. And it's someone who can never be replaced and who can never be erased. I think that in this heavy mourning, right, where so many of us got the news, that on one end we can be sad, but on the other end, right, we can be a little celebratory. Assata Shakur lived free. Assata Shakur left this earth a free woman, um, and the state couldn't get her. They couldn't defeat her, not one time, no matter what they did, no matter what they tried. In the end, Assata Shakur still won. And so, for us, it's important to remember that. But there are other things that I definitely want to remember because, as we know, unfortunately, in these moments, you're going to have a lot of opportunists. You're going to have a lot of folks who are going to jump in, who are going to use this moment, who are going to use her name for all kinds of things. And so I think what I want to remind the viewers is that to always ground ourselves, right, and never remove our historical figures, our historical influences from the politics they held, from the organizations that they were a part of, and from the actual work and the actual writings that they did, as opposed to a lot of the stuff that we consciously and subconsciously impose on them because of our own where we are at in the moments that we're in, right? Assata Shakur was a Marxist revolutionary who never abandoned her political ideology. um, while you have organizations who will use her name in one end and bash the Cuban system and the Cuban Revolution in the other end, right? We also have to remember that Assata Shakur never wavered from her commitment to, right, the socialist struggle and her Marxist ideology. We also remember that it was the Cuban people and the Cuban Revolution who held her, who protected her, right? Who kept her safe, who kept her fed, who kept her healthy in the face of the most difficult and trying consequences that their country has ever faced. Cuba right now is going through the worst economic crisis in its history as a direct result of the embargo, but also being put on the terrorism list that completely isolates it from everywhere else. A big reason why Cuba's on that terrorist list, aside from their support of Palestine and Venezuela and others, was Assata Shakur and their commitment to the Black liberation struggle. And in the face of the most dire consequences from the greatest empire in the world, for those 11 million plus people on that island, Cuba never wavered. Right, the proposition of Assata ever being returned to the United States was never even thought of or put on the table. And they said, we will suffer whatever we have to suffer. She's never going back in chains. And so we can never forget that and must always stand in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, with the Cuban people, and be eternally grateful, right, for what they did. I want to remind folks that Assata Shakur, in her biography, mentioned, while she's often remembered as a Black Panther, right, she was a Panther for a very short period of time. Assata Shakur was a committed member, right, and a conscious member of the Republic of New Africa. She becomes Assata Shakur in the Republic of New Africa. Her politic was New African, right? And so we don't want to, while it's no shade against the Panthers or whatever, a lot of the BLA members, if you remember, on the East Coast especially, were New Africans and were members of Republic of New Africa, right? And so folks need to study that and remember that and hold on to that, right? And continue to do deep study. The last thing I want to remind folks is that Assata Shakur was committed to the liberation of Black people. She was in solidarity with the liberation of all people and spoke around Puerto Rican independence, spoke around many different communities, but she stayed committed to the liberation of Black people, even though she lived 90 miles away from Florida, right? Even though she was exiled and couldn't come back home, she still remained committed to that struggle. And so, what we want to do is remember that we don't want to reduce our heroes to chants or to little sound bites or to simple quotes, but study their politic. I say this because I've always been one who never liked the Assata chant, right? We must love and protect each other. Not because I think it was wrong, but because it was never intended to be a chant. That is a part of a very powerful, very endearing letter to Black people specifically, right? She opens her letter saying, "Dear Black people," opens with an apology for being on that highway that took Zaid Shakur, that ended up getting her and Sundiata Kohli arrested, right? And continues to lay out in that same piece, right, why there had to be a Black liberation army. And as long as there was a Black woman, Black child, Black man who was suffering, there will always be a need for the Black liberation army. And then it goes into the piece, we must love, protect, right, defend each other, all of that. In that context, that so-called chant takes on a very different meaning, right? We have nothing to lose but our chains. We must defend ourselves. It takes a very different meaning when you read the whole context and her argument for why they did what they did, why they created the organization that they did, and why that organization and that struggle must continue for as long as Black people are still chained and enslaved in this country. And so I just ask folks in this time that we do the highest level to pay respect to Assata Shakur is to do the actual study. Don't take bits and pieces of her and recreate her in the image that we want. Let's take her for who she was. She gave us enough to read and to look at. The last thing, anyone who has ever read Assata Shakur, anyone who has ever had the privilege of speaking with those who met with her, because Assata had a team of folks who took care of her. Assata had a team of folks who kept her in the know of what's going on with movement here and vice versa. First and foremost was always that Assata always said, "Don't forget my people." The one request she had was, "Get my people out of prison. Don't leave them behind the walls." She was able to go free, but she never, ever, ever forgot those who stayed behind the walls and begged, "Please, right? Don't forget my folks." Right now, her co-parent, Kamal Siddiqui, remains behind the walls. We have Imam Jalil Al-Amin, who is suffering medical illness. We have Mumia Abu Jamal and countless others who are still behind the walls. We have to remember our folks are getting older. Our folks are getting up in age, right? Their bodies cannot hold on to what those institutions are doing to them for much longer. And so we need to do everything possible to bring our people home. I had the honor a few years ago of interviewing Mutulu Shakur for a mass call that Black Men Build had. You can find it on their Instagram and on their website. And I asked Doc, I said, how can we support political prisoners? What's the best way we can support political prisoners? What can we do? And he goes, "Man," the quote was, "Man, I waited a long time for y'all to get it together. I waited a long time for you all to come get me." Right? And that hurt in that moment. As someone who's been a part of political prison movement since I was 19, right? The fact that it's like enough is not being done to bring our folks home. Enough is not done. We're starting to lose people behind the walls. Our elders are coming out of those prisons broken, half dead, survive maybe a month or so, a year if they're lucky, after they've been released because of what's been done to them behind the walls. If we want to honor Assata Shakur, we do that by fighting for our political prisoners and bring them home. We do that by fighting to end that blockade, right? That criminal blockade on Cuba. And we do that continuing to build strong organizations grounded in strong ideology, right? To win this war against Black people and all oppressed people in this country. That is the lesson that we take from Assata Shakur. That is the one that she has always gifted to us. And that is the one that I'm going to keep moving forward every time I say her name. And lastly, I'll end with this. Assata Shakur was not in Cuba alone, right? There was another exile who left to Cuba at the same time, who was a part of the team who liberated Assata Shakur from Clinton Correctional, which was Nahanda Isoke Abiodun. And they were in Cuba together. We lost Nahanda a few years ago to cancer, unable to come back to Harlem, New York, that she always dreamed of, unable because that movement wasn't built enough to be able to bring our people back home. And so we lose them, right, in foreign lands. And again, eternal gratitude to the people of Cuba and the Cuban Revolution for holding both of our heroes, and ultimately, right, allowing them to transition in peace on the Caribbean sun, right under the Caribbean sky, away from the chains and the hell of this Babylon that we live in.
Hiram, thank you so much. I know you do have to run, but really appreciate you stopping by today and grounding us with that as we start off. And yeah, solidarity to you, man. I know that this is really hard, and but also, like you said, um, I mean, there is this like we have to be like US empire wanted to track this woman down and put her back in a cage and ensure she died there, right? And they were not able to do that. And that is a part of the legacy of her. It's a part of the legacy of the comrades who liberated her. And
Yeah.
it is a part of the Cuban Revolution. And so, yeah, thank you, man. I hope
Yeah,
you.
there was no amount of money for starving people. I mean, they're starving, but they are suffering, and there still wasn't enough millions of dollars for them to turn on her and our struggle. And that has to be honored and defended and respected. I would say for folks, be on the lookout. The Malcolm X grassroots movement will have a statement, and we'll have more information about what to do next. And so be on the lookout. If there's any organization to trust in this moment around this issue, it is the Malcolm X grassroots movement. So check out their social medias when that comes out. But thank you, Jared, for this opportunity, and thank you everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you. All right, Renee. You get to follow up Hiram.
I feel like that was a setup, though. Like you sent you sent me and Jared Ball a text. Like, if y'all can jump
Hey,
on, you ain't give no
look,
warning. You
I
ain't say
set out.
Hiram's. I might not have come on if I knew Hiram was gonna be on
I can go first. I can give you some space. I can do some
here.
mediocre remembrances so that you can
No, I
follow me
mean,
up instead of her.
listen, and Levy, like, I'm sure somebody would be like, this is not funny. Like, this life that we're living in right now, this hellscape that we're surviving, um, like the idea, exactly what Hiram said, that like they couldn't get her, right? I mean, as what was that, like a month ago, the FBI like renewed their most wanted list, and she was the top person on there. And the fact that she passed and she was not behind bars, for me, is like top tier, right? Um, I struggle with saying free because she couldn't do what she wanted, right? Like, she couldn't just go back to wherever, she couldn't go see her family, she couldn't travel where she wanted to go. Um, so she wasn't here, she wasn't locked up. I wonder if she would have considered herself free, right? Um, but I was telling you before we came on, I literally finished her book, I think like 2 weeks ago. I was like, yo, I haven't read Assata in a long time. Let me reread Assata, because it had just been a long time. Um, and I had forgotten a lot of the story, actually, because it had been so long since I had read it. Um, so I have no personal connection outside of knowing Duruba and loving Duruba, and him being part of that system also. But like, like, this is life, right? Like, people, they age, we lose our ancestors, they become our spiritual ancestors, we try to hold on to them as best as we can, um, once they're no longer of this earth. But what I hope is that people, the amount of people that are going to use this to like, gain a few like followers and make a little money and do the thing with the bag and like the whole thing like that is like frustrating for me because I just know that's coming. But I think what Hiram said that was really like of everything else also very important is, to remember that she was a revolutionary, right? She was radical. She was the Black radical tradition, full revolutionary, full like read, we have to read and we have to hold her as best as we can. So
Yeah, I mean that's right. And I think it's important the aspects particularly that the Hiram highlighted her dedication to studying scientific socialism, um, the Republic of New Africa. I agree with him that Malcolm X grassroots movement is certainly, an organization to keep your eye on what they're going to share because, I mean, I didn't realize this probably until I was older, but certainly the reason that I heard of her was through the Malcolm X grassroots movement because they also did a lot of work to um, to teach hip hop artists about her in the 1990s, right? So a lot of the songs that we end up getting, which I know people in the chat are already, talking about how bad some of those songs are, which is fine. Those songs are not the place to get her politics, right? But those songs are a product of people organizing. You know what I mean? They're a product of people working with artists, revolutionary movements working with artists to help spread the message of who Assata was, right? And that's really, it's important. It's important work. I mean, she was in Public Enemy songs, the rapper Paris, Dead Presidents, or Dead Prez. I mean, who else? I think Talib Kweli, probably Common. People have mentioned, right? And for me, I have obviously I have no direct connection. I've read her book a couple of times. I've, um, studied a good bit of the politics that she had and was associated with. But my introduction to her, I was joking with you about it a little bit beforehand, but it's not really a joke because I first learned about Assata Shakur through like the Source magazine and through rap songs, and it's it's too bad I think that we've kind of fallen quite a ways on like cultural fronts for movements. I feel like we have where, you know, I mean, I guess people would probably, and it's somewhat related to what Hiram's talking about the problem of people learning about Assata through some representation of mass politics or cultural representation that doesn't actually get to like who she really was and what she really believed. It kind of creates, a symbol or an icon, right, that stands in for the actual person. And I think it's just important for all of us to do what Hiram laid out and to actually, if folks don't know that much about who she is, to take the time to really learn. And yeah, I mean, I think, look, her liberation from Clinton Correctional was like, it's legendary. And
right.
that, like, that is such a US government never got over that, and the state of New Jersey definitely didn't get over that.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of it's, I think one of the unfortunate things, I've talked about this with folks before, one of the unfortunate things is because there's always a challenge when you're on the revolutionary left with telling stories like that in too much detail because you don't want to implicate different people in
Right.
criminal
Because the real
right?
story has never ever been made public, which
Yeah, so
you know.
there are aspects of it that are out there. I mean,
but the
there's
full
like,
story is not out.
yeah, it's the problem is that the version of the story that's out there is removed of its politics, right? So
Right.
like you have this book, there's this book called The Big Dance, which tells the story. There's another book called what's it called? It's Days of Rage, that tells the story, right? And they're books that are written by like either liberals or right wingers, basically,
Right.
that are, you know, really seeking to demonize
Right.
all of the
They're
people
told
who,
they're told from the government side. They're told
yeah,
from the state side, which is not,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah. And so it's unfortunate because it's like in order to kind of like I've always read the politics on one side, right? And then I have read those books because it's, you know, it's like a movie. It's like an action movie when you think
Right.
about what they did. Um, but I hope at some point, you know, we can get somebody with the right political inclination to really, you know, be able to, you know, do an Orisanmi Burton style book or something along the lines. And maybe we should try to force Ori into writing it.
Good luck with
Bully him into doing it.
that. I'm gonna let you do that. You do it.
Yeah. Well, Ori will be here on Monday, so
I know, I saw.
we'll badger him on it a little bit then. But yeah, I mean, I it's always been something that I have wanted is to somebody to actually take the politics of the BLA and the Republic of New Africa and Assata and combine it with this, you know, this liberation story. And yeah, I mean the point you make about hesitating to call her free, I think is a real hesitation. There is an interview with her where she actually, I think, rejects that idea that she is truly free, you know. I believe she said something along the lines of like, I know more about what freedom isn't than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, it still is an amazing thing that you would get somebody who they wanted to ensure spent the rest of her life
Mm-hmm.
in a cage, um, you know, under solitary confinement, all the kind of horrible restrictions that they want to put political prisoners and prisoners of war under,
Right.
and that she ends up getting to live her life, you know, in Cuba, and that they protect her. Like Hiram said, I mean, they were. This has been offered to Cuba many times as
Oh
a
yeah.
way to
Mm-hmm.
lessen the sanctions and the embargo and all of that, you know, kind of stuff. And on principle, they wouldn't do it, you
Right.
know, which is an amazing thing. Like you think about
It's
you know,
principle.
I mean, yeah, it's very principled. And maybe they believe that the United States government wouldn't really honor it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Which
certainly
would not be
right,
beyond the US to do that, correct?
right. But nonetheless, like I think most, you know, probably any other country in the world would end up making that exchange in order to try to uh you know, improve the quality of life for the masses of their people, you
Mhm.
know. And
And I also suspect that the US, you know, similar to how they've always done things, whenever I see Black folks I don't trust in Cuba, I'm always like, y'all not slick. leave, leave that woman alone. You know, like they made a big fuss when Jay-Z and Beyonce went to Cuba, and I was like, them mofos, they down there doing some trickery bullshit, and I just hope it doesn't work. And it didn't. And I don't know. I am fearful, I think, of this side, like as we lose people who are true to their politics in the way that Assata was true to her politics, and we get bombarded by people who are fraudulent revolutionaries and bag grabbers versus, you know, actually trying to get to liberation. um you know, I I'm afraid of what's going to happen now that she has passed, and there's always that possibility that the state and propaganda will take this opportunity now to whitewash who she was, right? And so, like everything else, right? Like, there is nothing that gets presented about Black historical figures who were actually radicals, actually revolutionary, actually thought leaders, like actually all those things that people sell themselves as now, that has not been whitewashed and rewritten. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm almost like, my stomach is almost turning at what's going to happen, down the line. And I'm hopeful that like her children don't fall into the trap of, like what we see now with some of the children of these, of people who have been held in high esteem by people who actually do the readings, who actually followed the speeches, who actually understand what they were trying to do and what is sold to the general public and then regurgitated by people who don't have any real understanding, right? Because that's what keeps us trapped. And so I don't know, we'll have to see. And folks like you, for as much as I joke around and stuff, like this space that you have created, that you and your partners have created for Millennials of Killing Capital, it's so important, right? Like the work that you all do is so important, because people they'll lose the real story if you don't exist, right? Like, and I don't, we got to find a way to make sure that these spaces where we're making the real attempt to do something don't ever go away. Ori,
We spoke him up.
I know, we called you up.
Before you start, Ori, I just want to say, Renee, that like Black Liberation Media, I know you all will do the best stuff related to this as well too. So, and your space, the space you and Jared and Kamau and everybody over there have created is the space, honestly, on YouTube at least, for the real conversations that need to be had about that. And I know that folks like you and Jared and others there will also, you'll be doing more work to defend her legacy against. I worry more about the nonprofit sphere and all of that, because that's already where a lot of the elite capture of her legacy and everything has
Right.
already occurred.
Right.
But yeah, so anyways, I just wanted to reciprocate that shout out to you, because
I
definitely.
appreciate it.
But Ori, we've already said that you now need to write the book about the liberation from Clinton Correctional that involves both the politics.
Yo, Ori's face
and
when you
I'll do
started
it.
talking.
I would love to do it. I just need some time. I would love
Yeah.
to do that.
Ori, I am in to help you research. I mean, you didn't answer my last text message,
I don't even
so
know
I
if I
don't
need
know.
to do
I don't know
research.
if like I don't know if you'll reach
Wait,
out at all. But
what happened? I didn't text you. Texted me, and I
I
didn't text you
did.
back.
It was like weeks ago too, but I was like, all right, Ori,
Why didn't you text me again?
because I don't like to bother people. You know how I know you're busy. I know you have things to do. The school year has restarted. And so I know, like, if you don't answer me within a day, that you got distracted because you are a busy man. And what I needed was like, it's not that serious. If you could, if you could do it, you're always welcome. But I'm not gonna harass you about stuff, man. Like,
I
I
appreciate
want
you.
you to
I
live.
appreciate you. I appreciate you. Yeah, I don't know what I could offer. I was listening to Hiram. I was in the car and saw your text. I thought I'd hop on and just, join in celebrating Assata's revolutionary legacy, her transition to the realm of the ancestors. I think that is an important concept. She very much became aligned with and was absorbed African traditional religions via Cuba. And so the idea that the transition from the physical realm to the spiritual realm is an actual transition, that it's not an end, that it marks a new beginning, is part of African traditional religion. And whether or not folks on here subscribe to that, it's important to understand that there is a system, there is a process for tapping into that knowledge and to communicate across those boundaries. And so I know that in this present moment, it's somewhat of a cliche for people to reference the ancestors in an abstract way, but I think that that's a very real thing. And so what we have now, when we invoke Assata's name, that brings with it a kind of an ancestral mandate, which is, she set a profound example for us. And, it's important for us to acknowledge that. I told you, Jared, that, when I had heard about it late last night. And then when I got the confirmation right before I was headed to the barbershop. And when I got to the barbershop, I go to a kind of black barbershop in the hood, partially because I like to keep my hair cut, but also it's just dope to be in that environment amongst the people. Like, the people are cool. I get to rap with everybody and just like keep my fingers on the pulse of like what's going on in DC locally. And All Eyes on Me, the Tupac film, just happened to be on. And usually they're listening to music or watching some BS. But today, like, there usually is ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, or some random podcast or some AI shit. Like, one time I was in there, they were watching AI reenactments of the Diddy trial, which was just wild. Today they happen to be watching the Tupac film. You know what I'm saying? Which isn't, a great film, but Tupac hits me in an emotional place. Like, I get emotional when I think about Tupac in general, and that's a whole other thing. And I just mentioned to my barber, a person that was very close to him, that was part of his extended political family, passed away today, Assata Shakur. And other people heard me say that, but nobody there knew who that was, and which of course isn't surprising, but it made me really sad. It made me really, really sad. They didn't know who she was. They didn't have a sense of, the Shakur legacy, the Shakur lineage, that political lineage, and what it meant. And so we talked about it for a little while, and, they were like, oh, for real? Oh, word? And, I sent people some information via text or whatever and just encouraged them to read it. But it was an interesting moment of serendipity, and also an interesting moment of sadness, the Assata, I can't remember if it was Assata or Black Boy by Richard Wright. It's one of those two books that was like the first book I ever read cover to cover. Either I think Assata was first. And I remember, because of the kind of family that I come from, it was on my bookshelf. And I was never really into reading until I got to like later in high school. And I don't know why, but I remember just like kind of being bored, right? This is before everyone had a phone. I guess nowadays I would have just picked up the phone and distracted myself in some way, but I was bored, sitting in the living room, and I just looked at this bookshelf that I had been looking at my whole life. And for some reason, I picked Assata off the shelf and like started it and like could not put it down. And it was the first text that I had ever encountered that made me want to read. And there was something about it that was so honest and clear. And I think part of the problem with the other stuff that I had been forced to read, either through school or whatever, choose your own adventure books and all that, like I used to read some of that stuff, but I didn't really devour it. It wasn't until that book where I devoured a text all the way through, because she was able to cut through so much of the mystification, and just, there was something about these other texts that just didn't speak to me, and that book spoke to me in a very profound way. And I remember I read through it very quickly, and then I just was on the search for more. Like I think I picked up Black Boy, I think I read all the Panther stuff, like that was it. I was like, I want more of that. And so I really credit that book with kind of my own development into a scholar or whatever, a researcher. I was like, I want more of that. So that book in particular, and obviously it's such a beautiful piece of literature in the way that it's written, in the way that it's organized, in the incorporation of poetry, in the kind of humility and clarity, right? She approaches that book as a teacher. She's trying to teach us something. And it's probably the book that I've recommended most. Like, I've given that book away probably 15 times, I especially when I was in my 20s, I proselytized using that book. I would just give it to people. Like, if there was a young lady who I was courting and she hadn't read the book, I would give her the book. Like, yo, you need to get up on this, right? So, like, yeah. That's all I have to share at this moment.
Man, appreciate it. It's funny you have the big dance behind your shoulder. I don't know if you did that on purpose or if that's a total.
You know what? That's the research for Monday.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
I was thinking, and I can make this point on Monday, the big dance came out in '87, right? The movie we're talking about, the Badge of the Assassin, the film, comes out in '86. So I was trying to think of, okay, what else was there about the BLA in print? The only thing that was out was George. And most people didn't have the historical trajectory to recognize that George is BLA. I mean, that might have been understood as something else. So there was revolutionary suicide, there was Seize the Time, there was Eldridge Cleaver, post-prison writings. He starts talking about the BLA and Soul on Ice, but that's pretty much it. So that film entered into a vacuum. And so, but Assata comes out the year after Badge of the Assassin comes out as a film. And that's when we first understand, that's the first text to really tell us about the BLA and put it in a historical trajectory. And of course it ends with that, amazing prison break, which she doesn't say much about it for obvious reasons, but subsequently we've learned quite a bit more about that, but from a really weird, like antagonistic political perspective. What's going on,
Yeah.
Jared?
Peace. Oh, sorry, I didn't mute.
No, you're good, man. Good to see
No,
you.
look, I really appreciate this. I so super selfishly appreciate this and only wanted to jump on because I've been feeling terrible since the news started coming out. And then, like many of us, uh, had to function as if I didn't know because it was encouraged that we not share anything. And then I'm at this, in many ways, completely antithetical Bitcoin blockchain conference. And I'm like I want to just say, like, Asada just died. Like, you were talking about investing in blockchain. Like, we're missing all the plots at once. And so when I saw that you were doing this, I just appreciated it. Thanks for sending the link and inviting me to do it. But I am just going to get back in the car and just continue listening and appreciate. So just, but rest in power to Asada, and salute to the movement that produced her as a political species of sorts, and to the people that freed her, and to the people that have protected her in Cuba all these years, despite this whack ass country and its even black president upping the bounty on her. using a Black attorney general and a Black FBI agent to make the announcement. I mean, it's you know, so, and just all the people that have worked to support her and bring people to be engaged with her when possible. I mean, it's just salute to everybody, and to you three on screen, everybody in the audience, and let's find ways to produce more Assatas, you know.
I was about to say, so Ori got tasked with writing the book, and so, you know, we're gonna leave that there. And now you, Jared, are now gonna be tasked with doing your next series on Assata, and I am happy to help in both, however, which way. But
Let's
I
start.
feel,
You're right.
yeah, like I feel like, and I really mean this, like in rereading her book, I remember like I called my mother and I was like, I forgot like how real this story was, right? Like how much she gives about like her experience and everything, like being in jail and like all the stuff that she lived through. And you know, in many ways, I want to make sure that the real Assata does not get lost the way so many of our revolutionaries get lost with the whitewashing and the retelling and the whatever stories come out now that, you know, that she's gone. Like, let's get
Hey,
on it.
I'm down. You know, back in the day, once when we did the George Jackson mixtape at the Real News Network, the next one was supposed to have been Assata, and we just ran into all kinds of obstacles in the production of that. So I'm happy to do that and work with all of you and any of you in doing that, and just encouraging as many other people to be producing media and discussions like this. I've never understood this, to be honest. Is it now safe? Is the unfortunate contradiction that it's now safe to share stories when people have gone and met with her? Like, because I've always understood that was supposed to have been kept kind of circumspect and whatnot. Or is that space now going to open up and allow for at least more memories and stories, et cetera? Where are we with that?
I don't know the answer to that. Probably consult an attorney. but I would hope so. You know, I would hope that that does open up because
Allegedly,
yeah,
if it had ever happened, I'm just
if
saying.
that ever
Yeah,
occurred to anyone that we may or may not know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jared, for doing this. Thanks for inviting, me, Ori. Always good to see and hear from you. I cannot wait to read the book. And Renee will be in touch.
Ori right
Here's what
now
I can
he
here's what
wants
I
to
can
bark at
offer.
all of us.
Here is I can read a statement. I actually haven't read this in a while, but Duruba wrote it in 1977, and it's called "Why Assata Shakur Must Be Supported and Why Such Support is Support of the Black Liberation Movement and Does Not Stand Above Correct Political Analysis." I don't know if I'll read it all, but and again, this is I didn't. I think I'll read it. Comrade Assata will stand trial this year for the murder of a New Jersey highway patrolman and the wounding of another, as well as the murder of her comrade Zaid Malik Shakur. These charges grew out of the ambush of Assata Zaid and Sundiata Acoli on the New Jersey Turnpike over 3 years ago. There are some people, quote, especially white feminists, who feel that Assata should be supported because she is female and therein a leader of the radical feminist movement, in quotes. These same people maintain that Lolita LeBron, the resolute Puerto Rican nationalist, Suzanne Saxey, a revolutionary white woman, are all equally leaders in the feminist struggle. While this may be true of Comrade Susan, and we cannot presume to speak for Sister Lolita, this view in respect to Sister Assata is a totally incorrect view. Indeed, we doubt the validity of such a view in respect to Sister Lolita for obvious nationalistic reasons. This view is incorrect because it completely ignores the national question inherent in Black people's struggle for liberation. Such a view is in effect a typical racist reflection of the politics of some radical feminists. Once again, we are confronted with white people's attempt to appropriate for themselves our struggle, pain, suffering, and sacrifice, and claim them as their heritage. Assata is indeed a woman, but she is a revolutionary Black nationalist woman committed to the liberation struggle of her people. There are countless Black women who struggle today on all levels of the Black liberation process. These sisters sacrifice daily because of their commitment to our people's eventual liberation. Black women have a long tradition of struggle, sacrifice, and triumph, but what certain radical feminists, in quotes, fail to realize is that every people have the right to their own history, and that Black revolutionary nationalism is the restoration of Black people's right to their own history. When certain white feminists support Assata because she is female, they are in effect saying that Black people must continue as an adjunct and an extension of white American history and culture for over 300 years, from the moment Black Africans of diverse tribal origins were kidnapped into slavery and the crucible of that slavery forged into a unique people. We functioned as economical extensions of Euro-American history. The social repercussions of this condition was finally broken during the civil rights phase of the Black liberation process, when for the first time revolutionary Black nationalism arose out of the ashes and blood of Watts, Detroit, Harlem, and Cleveland. It keeps going. Should I keep going?
Keep going, man. It's great.
So obviously, I don't want to try to speak for Duruba. This is something he wrote in 1977. His thinking on nationalism has shifted, and he will obviously have his own response to this. So I don't know if this is out of place, but it just felt like something I could do. White radical feminists should indeed support our sister Assata, but not because she is female, but because they support our people's right to determine their own destiny. Surely these same feminists did not support the Vietnamese people's struggle against US imperialism merely because women were involved. Such an approach would be a grand political absurdity. After all, who will save the Vietnamese babies and ensure them a future? Who will guard the right of the Vietnamese people to determine their own destiny and make their own history, except the Vietnamese people themselves, all of them? Comparatively, Black men, women, and children, male and female, are oppressed as a whole, as a people, and not merely because half of them are female. To support Assata is not to support some bourgeoisie notion of radical feminism, but to support the revolutionary ideal of Black national self-determination, the historical answer to racism in the United States. There are some white leftists who would support Assata because she is a revolutionary and opposed to the capitalist ruling class and their flunkies in blackface. These individuals and groups proceed from the premise that Black people's struggle is merely one of class, and that the virulent racism of US society can effectively be combated with some social democratic ideal of white and Black worker solidarity. White workers and Black workers unite, they scream. Solidarity at all costs, they rave, not understanding that they are screaming in the face of history and hundreds of years of domestic neocolonialism and racism. Maybe I'll leave it there.
All right.
Let me read this paragraph. Black liberation by its own dialectic is revolutionary. There can be no Black self-determination and national independence without a revolutionary change of power in the US. This should be obvious, but it is not equally as obvious that is it not equally as obvious that the Black working class has a historical mission that the white working class does not have? Black workers have a nationalist identity and an obligation to Black people bestowed upon them by the historical experience of Black people in the US. White workers only have the historical obligation of overthrowing their own class enemy and exploiter. The fact that both have a common class enemy does not mean that both Blacks and whites have the same historical mission. Therefore, to support Assata merely because she opposes a capitalist ruling class is once more a concealment of the fact that Black people are exploited as a class and oppressed as a people. It is another variation of the same old theme, i.e. Black people exist solely as the extension of white American history. This issue cannot be avoided. Support of Assata is support of our right to national self-determination and the struggle to acquire that right. So that's not all of it. I skipped around. So that's from 1977, authored by Duruba bin Mohad. Assata Shakur would be liberated from Clinton Correctional Facility 2 years later. Interestingly enough, Duruba was being transported from prison, from one prison to New York City to go to another prison while that was happening. So he heard about it happening while he was being transported. He heard about it like on the police radio and just smiled because the police had been harassing him in the car. And right at that moment, 2 years after he wrote this, she broke out. So I know that wades into some maybe thorny contradictions and critiques, but I just thought I would share that.
No, I think it's important. I appreciate it. Few people actually in the chat asked Ori. I assume that's an archival document that you have, right? It's not like something that's online or anything like that.
I can figure out. It's an archival document. There is stuff on the Freedom Archives, and then I have a whole bunch of stuff that's not public. Duruba and I are working on putting out his collected works. I'm not sure if that's actually going to make it in there because of just how long it is. So I'm trying to figure that out. But more information on that soon. I think that is at Freedom Archives, actually. So
Okay.
if you were to go to Freedom, people should go to Freedom Archives and type Assata Shakur and then just
Absolutely.
consume everything there. There's audio, there's text, right? Organize study groups around that. It would be a great supplement to just reading the book. And there's also the documentary Eyes on the Rainbow. But there's a lot of stuff by and about Assata on the Freedom Archives, much of which is digitized. So folks can engage that, on their own or collectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another, I mean, Freedom Archives is definitely another space, I mean, for people to just always go to and utilize. But I'm sure that at some point they will also do something that is, more directly dedicated to Assata, and her transition here. And I'm sure, they have an amazing collection of things. And I look forward very much, Ori, to your book too, with Duruba on those archives, because I know there's a lot of good stuff like that letter that you just read from that people can get. As far as the contradictions, I mean, I think that that's honestly, it's right on. Like, I think that I've heard this for years for people around Assata. I mean, one, yeah, the notion that socialists or, anti-capitalists, want to pull her into their struggle because she was also, scientific socialist, anti-capitalist background. Same thing with, kind of feminism, white feminism. I mean, it's not a politic. Neither of those is a politic that she ever espoused solely as her, like, primary contradiction and mode of struggle. And I think to what Hiram said earlier, you have to understand the influence and the study of Marxism, dialectical materialism, but also the revolutionary Black nationalism, the RNA strand through and through. And that, to not uphold all of those components of her political philosophy is to do a disservice, but also it's another version actually of what you were saying, Renee, of just your concern about people taking her politics and, fitting it into some kind of liberalism, even though it might be a more revolutionary version of that in some way. It's still not, not really coherent to her whole political philosophy.
Can I just say real quick, because I'm going to jump off here again, thanking all of you for this, but something that I'm hearing Hiram said and Ori just mentioned is I think very important, because Duruba has also pointed out over the last year or two, a couple of times, as far as I'm aware, that the version we get of Assata in her book was one shaped largely by, I think, her aunt and the publisher, and had everything as much about getting her back in the United States as it did as conveying some certain set of ideas in politics. And it reminds me a little bit of what has been said about even George Jackson's work, Soledad, what he said about Soledad Brother. So going to the Freedom Archives, digging into these to the to the histories and the analysis of people on the screen and others is very important, as we want to constantly remember and commemorate her. That there's a lot more that need, the politics, as Hiram described, apparently are very important to not forget, and they're not overly emphasized in her autobiography. So we do need to go beyond that, and we need to engage all these other interviews she's done and the archives that the Freedom Archives have offered and others. So yeah. But again, Jared, thank you for the invitation. Thanks for doing this. Ori, Renee, always good to see you. And to the undefeated chat that I'm sure is out there being undefeated, thank you too.
Yes.
Facts.
Peace, everybody.
See you
Thanks,
tomorrow.
Eric.
Yeah, right
Thank
on.
you.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah,
Right
see
on.
you tomorrow for sure. Yeah. All right, peace. Yeah, I mean, I think that point around, I mean, I think it's one of those things too, though, because it's like I've heard that before. I've heard Duruba say that before around the book Assata, but I think in a lot of ways it is a book that's somewhat like the autobiography of Malcolm X to some extent, right? Where you have Alex Haley as an interlocutor, and we could look at the ways that Haley's politics maybe influence the telling of the book a little bit. But I do think it's one of those books that needs to be read anyways, because I think that there is so much, and both, I mean, Ori, you talked about its influence on you. It was one of the first books for me when I started to get sort of back into politics. I went through a similar period because I was an English major in college, and that pretty much destroyed my ability to read. Like it made me hate reading. I read a lot of fiction and even fiction that was written by really great people, but it just and Assata was one of the books. It was one of the first books I read, years after not reading, post being an English major, that then was similar kind of thing that you were talking about, Ori, of it just like, oh, like I need more and more and more like this. And then, just opened up an appetite for, all the books that are around me, at this point. But so I do think it's important texts, but I do agree that it's true that her politics, I think, are not necessarily front and center in that book in the way that you could find in some of her own writings and, political writings and things like that.
Right. And I always thought that was intentional, right? Like she was writing from a not, at the time, it was still, you don't really know what was going to happen. She had gotten away. She wrote it with her aunt, right? I'm not misremembering the details. And so, there's a part of it that I think was really about humanizing her for people who just thought she was like this, the quote unquote cop killer, right? Like even now, like I live in New Jersey now. And so all the headline, like I'm getting all the, the headlines from the local, and it's all like cop killer, FBI's most wanted, like, you know what I mean? Like there's no space, and there will be no space made here, like in these media spaces, like the mainstream narrative media spaces, to recognize her as a revolutionary, right? They're going to focus solely on she killed a cop and she was on the most wanted list, and like it just makes me want to throw my phone across the room.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the interesting thing. This is why I was saying, Ori, I know you have to go. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we let you bounce? We'll see you on Monday. First of all, people come back Monday to listen to us talk to Ori.
No. Yeah, I gotta run. Just to say thank you. Condolences to the family. Condolences to all of us. It's also a time for celebration in the sense of, they never got her. You know what I'm saying? Like they never got it. Let me just leave it like that. And I think I agree perhaps. I'm not even sure I agree about the relative um, absence or the level of like kind of explicit engagement with her politics in the text. I'm not sure. I haven't read it in a while. I'll have to revisit that. Um, but I think to what I think Renee was getting at, I mean, I think A, yes, it was probably intentional. B, it's not always about your political line and articulating your political line in that way, right? It's about demonstrating a kind of ethics and a steadfastness, a samud, to use the term that the Palestinians would use, like in terms of her and clarity, honesty, humility, right? All of that is reflected in the text itself, and I think that's part of what makes it so useful and so beautiful. So that's a thought, and I'll
I
end it
think,
there and say thank you. Yeah.
yeah, appreciate it. I think that's a really good point. And we'll see you Monday, Ori. I look forward to it. We'll be
Me too.
Peace,
getting into
Ori.
Yeah,
Good to see
other.
we're
you.
gonna get into this again. Yeah, good to see
Yeah,
you too,
absolutely. All
Renee.
right.
All right, peace.
Peace. Yeah, to the point that you were making, Renee, I mean, I think this is the interesting thing about how co-optable and not
Mm-hmm.
co-optable she is, and what and who and what will do the co-optation,
Yep.
right? Because
Yep.
I don't think it's going to be the state. Not, I mean, there's funny ways. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but a few years ago, a couple years ago, Eric Adams introduced his new police commissioner, who's a
Mm-hmm.
black woman,
Yep.
and he did it in front of an Assata Shakur mural.
Yep.
So, like, that obviously is a form of state co-optation, although I would guess that they probably were too stupid to realize what the hell they were doing. Like, they were in like a community center in Queens, I think, that just had a had an Assata Shakur mural, and they didn't even know like who they were standing in front of, would be my guess, because the right went totally nuts when this happened. But I do think that, you know, it is the nonprofit sector, and also, unfortunately, like radical organizations, I think, kind of are at risk for it, for the reasons that Duruba laid out in
Mm-hmm.
that piece as well. And so I think it really is important for us to try to be very principled when we when we invoke her name and her legacy, and who she was, what she still stands as a symbol of. But yeah, I mean, it's hard for the state, for someone who dies on the FBI most wanted list. I mean, we can see how they did it with like Malcolm X or something like that, but
I
he
I think I'm
doesn't
always
have that history of actually, them saying this is a cop killer.
right, but I also think that there is always, unfortunately, there are always people willing to make their bag off of being assholes, right? And so if someone wanted to retell this story, um, remove all of the politics from it and just paint her as this person who grew up and turned into a cop killer, and then Cuba housed her for the rest of her life, they would let that movie happen, right? It would be 100% supported by the state. It would not be able to be made without the assistance of the state, because they would have to include the FBI, the police department, the state of New Jersey. Like all of these bodies would have to be involved in the recreation of that story. And in doing so, the story would undoubtedly become that Assata Shakur was this, this woman who got away with like bank robberies, and then she finally killed a cop, and then, she got to flee to Cuba, and then, like I could when I tell you I could see it, Chimacha just said it, I can see them putting that movie out and me losing my ever loving fucking mind. Right. And like I could see it, because the goal, as always, is to create a situation in which we're not focused on, or even paying a little bit of attention to, the reality of her knowledge, of her politics, like the fact that she got away, right? Which, here is seen as like, oh my God, like it's amazing, right? Like after reading I Am Maroon, right? And his story of his multiple like escapes and like how he, right? Like the idea of getting away and them not being able to get you is like that is the story, right? Like she was so principled in the person that she was, that an entire country was willing to suffer to keep her safe. And that's not the story they would tell.
No, I mean, and it is amazing, and it's also amazing that she is able to stay free, as we're now in this era of like intense digital surveillance, this era where
Right.
the Cuban Revolution is what, 80 years old, something like that, right? Like so like you know there's been a lot of time for the CIA and everybody else to try to get into these spaces where they could, abduct or assassinate or anything else.
Mhm.
There's also a story, and I don't know if this is true. This one might come out at some point, but I'm not saying anything that's not like, there aren't press pieces out there on this. But there was a story that she came to New Jersey like a few years ago and collected money because there was like some civil proceeding that determined that she was owed money for something,
Mm.
and that she somehow came into the state and signed off on it and got back out. Now, I don't know if that's true. And but it was again in the right wing, I've had a notification, a Google notification on Assata for years, right? And it's one of my favorite notifications because every time it comes up, it's just right-wing media losing their shit. Like that's what it
Right.
is. It's like, oh, another, person stood, did this. It's how I saw the Eric Adams story, right? Like they just lose their minds whenever Assata is invoked in a positive light, right?
Mhm.
And this will be, her passing will be another one of these things. There will be some report that gets made about all the people who celebrated, her passing. It's like the inverted Charlie Kirk for them.
Somebody just said it in the chat, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't even like handle how this is going to be celebrated, because it's going to be, they are going to be dancing and singing that Assata's gone.
Yeah, but they can't really celebrate, Renee, because they never caught her. You know what I mean? And so like,
you think that matters to them? That don't matter to these people. They're ghouls. They are ghouls.
I know. I look at it though as a supreme manifestation of the weakness of that they couldn't. You know what I mean? Like this is a permanent thorn in the side of Empire, that they were not able to recapture this woman, and now they never can. And so that is the piece that I hold on to, that probably, I mean, I don't want to say it's the thing I hold dearest, right? Because there's a lot, and this is a beautiful woman. But I do hold that dear, that they couldn't, that they never did.
It's a big one. It's a big one. And that I'm gonna have to, read that piece that Ori was reading parts of. I feel like I read that a long time. It sounded familiar as he was reading it, but there's so many different things. And I think I'll start with the Freedom Archives with this thing that I'm about to harangue Jared to do. And I'll harangue you too. We can all be part of this little process together. Because I do think it's important that that we make a space for people to understand like her politics, right? And that's important for me. But
Yeah.
but listening to that letter, it reminded me, like, you know, I've been fighting with the whites a lot this week about Charlie Kirk and me being mean because, you know, I don't want to cry about, you know, the white supremacist, you know, being lost to his own, you know, his own machination. Like in the end, this is what he celebrated, right? He was all good with these things, and so I have no desire to express any bit of sadness when people are lost to situations that they created. Like, I don't give a shit, right? And so, but I found, you know, these white people in these spaces who want to call themselves like advocates and free speech people and this, that, and the other thing, and in the end, like, they're all just so full of shit, right? Like, and it's the same. It's exact. Like, I was listening to Ori read the letter and thinking, this is the same shit we're living with now. Like this constant, like, people who are only okay with Black folks speaking as long as they don't overstep, right? Like the minute they see us as overstepping, it becomes like, you know how, like, I Jared, we've been in communication a long time. Somebody told me that I was playing a victim this week, and I was like, "What in the like? What hell did I just drop into?" Where me talking about racism means that I'm playing a victim, and you're supposed to be like my ally in this battle for liberation. Like, are we serious? Like, are we serious about this? And so, you know, I just can't. I can't do it. And this is about to be a rough afternoon for me. I see it coming because I might need to stay off the internet so I don't lose my
I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry that you've been dealing with that. I know some other folks that I'm close to have also been dealing with that because we did a thing on Kirk as well. We didn't go as you all did great stuff over on Black Liberation Media, but yeah, I mean, it's rancid. I mean, this is a very, somebody just posted, I'm gonna share this. This is what Fox News's headline was. Convicted cop killer Assata Shakur and FBI most wanted terrorists dead in Cuba communist regime says. Like, that's like all the things. They got all of them in there.
Yep. They squeezed it all in. Yep. And the one from the New Jersey NJ.com is notorious fugitive on FBI terrorist list dies in Cuba decades after NJ cop killing, prison escape. I'm like,
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to the point about the rehabilitation, right, or the sanitization of her image, I think the interesting thing, one of the interesting things will be how far people go into the innocence thing as a shield, right? Because this has been an issue for a long time that people have debated within the solidarity movement for her, right? Because there's the whole story that like she was shot with her hands up and this kind of thing, and like Duruba was one of the people who was always like, there's no way, like, you know, that this, you know, but this was, I understand it in a certain regard, right? Because when you are advocating for a political prisoner, you know, or somebody in political exile, and you're trying to get you know, them clemency, right? Then often you use whatever, you know, you can in terms of crafting this, you know, the appeal, right? And how the appeal is going to look, knowing the forces that you are appealing to. And I think, you know, if there is a more sanitized version that comes out that has some way of going within the kind of mainstream liberal, as well as you know, even state politicians potentially, or whatever, like further down the line, I think it will come with the story of innocence, right? It will come with the story of, you know, Assata Shakur was framed and she never did anything that they claimed that she did, right? And that this was all overstep and so on. And to be clear, like, she may have been framed, right? That, like, a lot of the revolutionaries from that era were framed, but also to be clear, like, her status as an enemy of the state was valid, right? Like, the
Right.
state saw her clearly as an enemy, and her politics and how she put them into practice, like, is what led to that, right?
Right.
And so I think that's another thing to kind of, that it is a challenging place for people to navigate. I mean, like, I don't know. And that's the difficulty, honestly, of doing work around political prisoners and prisoners of war in the current climate that we are in, right? Like, we're not in the climate in which folks are getting together a brigade and freeing their sister comrade from a prison cell and getting her on a plane to Mexico or whatever, and then to Cuba, or however that journey actually went. Um and so it's that's the other thing I think about too, in terms of political prisoner work and all of that, is like, how do we begin to build back up to a position of more relative strength, that even not necessarily acts that bold, right? But like, where there's a consequence, right, to the state for keeping people political prisoners, such that they consider it in their best interest at times to free them, right, or to get them out. So, but we won't be beloved by the right wing internet.
No.
We're
No. But I just, I'm waiting to see what I'm also waiting to see is if any of the Black Miss leadership, jumps on this on Assata, and which, how they present it. Like, what's the storyline going to be from those fools, and how are they gonna attempt to capitalize on this? But like I said earlier, like, I had no direct connection, only knowing, that her politics was aligned with what I believe to be the way we need to be, right? Like, I held Assata in high esteem and regard. So it hurts my heart a little that she's gone, But,
yeah, it does. And I share the esteem and regard, for sure. Absolutely. And just to give people a sense, I'll just say a little bit about what we're doing on Monday. So Orisanmi Burton, who was here a little while ago, is going to come back on. And there's a film that was put out in the 80s. It's part of our Imperial 80s series that M2 Megant and I are doing. I'm talking about it because it directly really relates to Assata and to her comrades. But the movie, which is based on a book, is called Badge of the Assassin. And it's a terrible movie. So I'll just say that to point blank. Like, it's one of the worst movies ever made. And it stars James Woods. It stars Yaphet Kotto in it. It stars, it has Pam Grier is in it. And I know it's painful stuff. And it was a TV movie, so it's not even like, not a Hollywood thing, but TV movies, and this, I mean, that was a big deal in the 80s. Like, they could get,
big,
like,
yeah.
And it's about the New York Five, which becomes the New York Three, which is Jalil Muntakim, Herman Bell, and Albert Washington, who are three BLA veterans, right, who were all political prisoners for a long time. But it's a totally manufactured narrative. It's a narrative that's designed to demonize the BLA. It's the type of narrative that sets up how people like Fox News, depict or talk about Assata Shakur. And so Ori's going to join us. Safia Bukhari also made a documentary that featured the New York Three soon after it came out. It's about 30 minutes. It's also in the show description of the show for Monday that people can check out. I encourage people to watch that more than watching the actual movie. But yeah, so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the this long process of demonization of the Black Liberation Army, but also, Ori is one of my favorite people in terms of talking about, the politics of those people, their sensibilities, what they understood about what they were doing when they engaged in the types of actions that they did. And, I think that will be a good addition to this discussion as well.
Yeah. Or, I mean, I don't know if you can get much better than Ori when you're talking. If that's the topic in the conversation. So I had already had it marked on the calendar to be in the chat so I can listen in, and I'm looking forward to it. So
yeah, and I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to say, Renee?
No, outside of, as everyone has expressed, like, love and condolences to Assata's family and those who, who are gonna have to hold her in our hearts, man. Like, it's gonna be those of us who are adamant of making sure that her reality is what lives on, and not like whatever fantasy other people want to put on her. Like, we're gonna have to make sure we take the reins on this one. So, and I appreciate you. I appreciate the invite. And just thank you.
Thanks for joining me. Truly, I did this on like a real whim. I sent it to you like 15 minutes before we went live, and sent it to Hiram and Jared and Ori. So I appreciate y'all for all stopping by. And yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to say other than just reiterate kind of what I tweeted initially, which is like, Assata Shakur is immortal, right? Like, this is a passing, but her story having the politics that she had, engaging them in a revolutionary manner, being liberated from prison by her comrades, and then the US government just being unable to recapture her despite all of their effort. Cuba gets is a critical aspect of that story. And she's going to continue to inspire people long after this empire falls, and I truly believe that. So yeah, again, yeah, my deepest condolences, of course, to her family and her loved ones and people who knew her and organized with her, struggled with her, had community with her. It's a huge, I can't imagine what that loss is like, on that kind of level, so deepest condolences there. But there's nothing that they can do now.
Yeah.
She is as free as she
I was
possibly
gonna
could
say,
be.
she is truly free now. She is truly
Yeah.
free now. So
Yeah. All right.
right.
Thank you, Renee. I
You're
look forward
welcome,
to
Jared.
watching what you have going on. What do you have going on tomorrow?
Dwayne Monroe's coming back. And
Great.
I don't know, Ntume was supposed to jump on, and so is Musa. So it should be a full cast of conversation. So hopefully everybody is able to make it, and I am looking forward to the conversation, because there's just so much, there's a lot happening. And for folks who aren't familiar with Dwayne Monroe, he is an expert in IT and technology, and so just looking forward to that. But
Yeah, no, I am too. He's going to be on our show next Wednesday, but I look forward to seeing what you guys are talking about tomorrow. And I'll probably be running back and forth between birthday parties or something like that. But doing the parent, grind. But I
Oh
will
yeah.
have it streaming on my phone anyway. So yeah, thanks everybody. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Ori. Thank you, Jared Ball. Thank you to Hiram. Really appreciated you all stopping by and sharing on this this bittersweet day. As we memorialize the passing of Assata Shakur.